wonderful, diverse set of perspectives in our group, and it would have been a very rich discussion to go on further. I think what all of us were feeling, and that this was a very, very rich day. A lot of information provided. Those who've been following the chat and copying it into your notes and so forth, I know many people expressed the desire to dig in deeper. Also, I think a lot of commitments in our discussion to expanding our own social circles, to listening again, to pledging. Also, I think a very beautiful thing from Itzi saying, you know, pledging really to listen deeply and to hear the other with deep openness, and recognizing that listening is a way of healing. So I think there are commitments, I think, on people's parts to try to do this in their own personal lives in ways that will make a difference, recognizing the big message we've heard from even within our breakout group, but also the session all throughout the day about the importance of local personal action and a heart-to-heart connection.
Great. Who is next who'd like to go? If you want to just raise your hand for me. Who's a facilitator? Let's see here.
Jonathan?
Okay, Jonathan?
Definitely. Yeah, so within our group, I think one of the big themes that really stuck with our participants was the difference between, or the interplay between peace and justice, and how it's really important to understand that, and how it's important to conflict resolution and moving forward. The other thing, as Anne mentioned, was the importance of the local and focusing in on actually working closely with people. And as one person mentioned, walking directly with the people that you're working with and learning from them, and using that as a way to move forward and bridge divides. One other note that one person committed to was leaving perfectionism behind and focusing on taking these steps towards building bridges and solving a lot of these problems in the way that you know how, and not really just trying to perfect or copy or imitate what other people you see are doing, but learn from the people you're working with and move forward.
Yes. And Eileen, are you there? Because you were in our group, and I was wondering if you could share some of your thoughts, which were really powerful. Maybe not. Maybe we lost you.
Sorry. Yeah, we were talking about the connection between peace and justice more. And I shared that Dr. King believed that you had to push to get to the table, you know, when situations were really unequal. And so things like nonviolent direct action are kind of polarizing initially, but the purpose in his viewpoint was to ultimately bring reconciliation from a more just place, and that people couldn't really do that work until they had addressed, in his case, racism, but you know, that kind of systemic inequality. So I think that theme of how peace and justice relate was something that was swirling in our group.
Yes. And Henry, can I call on you next?
Oh, you're muted.
Henry McHenry?
Yeah, there we go. Okay. One of our participants said he needs to walk the walk in his own house, letting the passions cool. Another said, what we need is a new partner around race. And I don't know if this is Ms. Onyananka. If Bernadette is that partner now. And a third person said, how we need to know how we as a field, as the Depolarization Network, can do better at what he called appreciative inquiry. That is, rather than advocacy. That's it.
Thank you. Mike?
Real quick, there was some very interesting discussion of the need to have urban, rural, proactive connection and engagement and bridging. There were two, and there was frustration that one person expressed about the difficulty of creating that. But then there was also another example where somebody said, no, it's very real in my life, and it actually has really contributed to my engagement with what we're talking about here. There were two very specific suggestions from one of our people for a truth commission in the United States, and I think the execution of that would obviously have to address the bridging ideas and models that we're talking about. And then for a search for ideas, policy ideas, and projects that could really reach like 75% of the country, where you would have broad-based support and for whatever the idea was. And we didn't really get into what that would be, but my mind started kicking on things like, you know, government reform and transparency and responsiveness and, you know, basic income, things like that.
Great. And Bernadette, saw your hand.
There we go. Yeah, so in our group, we talked really about the difficulty in depolarizing sort of media and information, and sort of where's the starting point. And so there was a tie-in sort of to the need for institutional change, particularly within the media that, you know, is outside of the Fox News spectrum. There's still a lot of responsibility that falls on quote unquote liberal media outlets to really re-examine sort of how they're crafting their narratives, and also how they're responding to sort of the misinformation that's coming out. And I feel like there's you know, highlighting that there's a lot of missed opportunity within these institutions to really sort of speak truth to power in a much more useful way. And then also there was, you know, we looked at, or we talked about sort of the real difficulty and how do you engage with the other, you know, the other end of the political spectrum when there's so much intransigence between the two, and really the need to start really this concept of meeting people where they are, but really sort of trying to identify what their vision for a good life looks like, and then really making incremental like progress in one, helping educate them about the basic concepts that are sometimes deeply misunderstood, particularly within the more vocal part of the Trump supporters, or just more vocal, like deeply conservative factions that are often like driven by, again, like false narratives. And, you know, not expect to change people's minds, but at least to identify that there is a shared, if there is commonality between a vision for what is a good life and what that requires, and then sort of going from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We have time for, we have like 2 more minutes. If anybody else wants to, there's been a lot of rich dialogue here. Yes.
I'm not the official facilitator for my group, but something did come up from Patrice that I thought was worth reading out, which is just that this was a really energizing event, and that she and possibly others would welcome some concrete next steps of you know, working groups, or taking on some of these big questions, or just providing a platform and a way to carry some of this forward.